Mr. Courtney Betty. He is the president and CEO of Time West Herbal Care. And just for some context, Time West has played a leading role in developing a legal framework for medical marijuana, not just in Jamaica, but in the entire Caribbean. And so by extension, to get medical marijuana from the Caribbean onto the international market. Now, Mr. Courtney, welcome again. You have an interesting background. Now, you're an attorney, over 25 years experience. You went from prosecuting cases in Canada, some of them drug-related cases for the government of Canada, to now being one of the leaders in the legal medical marijuana industry. Give us, as the Americans would say, give us your quick elevator speech introduction about yourself in the context of legal marijuana.
Well, my life has been very interesting. I started off my legal career with the Department of Justice Canada, and part of my responsibility was prosecuting cases on behalf of the federal government, which included drugs, including cannabis as well. And I also have had the fortune of working along with the government of Jamaica, helping them to rewrite and create a legal framework for medical cannabis in Jamaica. And as well now working as a legal advisor to other Caribbean countries and trying to show them the benefits of this industry. So it's been a little bit of a different approach to my legal career, but certainly one that's been an exciting one for me.
Interesting. So let's face it, there's still somewhat of a stigma attached to marijuana. I guess in your line of business, how do you overcome that? What do you say to potential investors, to governments in the Caribbean who are trying to get involved in this?
Well, you raised a very important question, and what I find so fascinating was that from the very beginning, when I, decided to take a look at this industry 6 years ago, my focus has been strictly medical. We've never looked at recreational. I was one of the first few companies actually that said that we would not advocate smoking, and we've stuck with that. So we've been very focused on producing medical products. Our big area is pain relief, because we now have, scientific evidence that clearly demonstrates that different forms of cannabis can help with pain. And for the last 3 years, I've been working on a great project, which is in relation to how CBD, which is the non-psychoactive part of the plant, can actually reduce anxiety. And I think that's something that I think in a few months I'll be able to really bring forward some of the accomplishments that we've done in that regard, which I'm very proud of.
So what is your overall vision now? I know you've done excellent work with Jamaica. You've gotten, some aspects of that industry almost unionized with the farmers, and so being able to supply their own. What is your vision for a wider Caribbean, being able to sell marijuana on the international market, maybe? Give us an idea of what the overall plan is for your company.
Well, the vision really, and I always put my company in the context of how can we assist, how can we advance, how can we help development. And when you look at the Caribbean and Jamaica and St. Vincent and a few other countries are now coming online, Antigua's done, St. Lucia's looking at it, Barbados is already there. What makes my approach very unique is I don't think that you can say a marijuana industry. I think you've got to look at what each country has. You could look at, let's take the British Virgin Islands, for example. They've got some amazing infrastructure, offshore banking and all of those. So BVI was to create an industry. Let's leverage what you have already, not trying to recreate something new. And I really think it has to be a CARICOM type of approach, because we're just smaller islands compared to trying to do it on our own. And so that synchronicity needs to happen. That's kind of my vision, but my goal is I want to produce products that's going to go into the medical system that the Ministry of Health in Jamaica or the Ministry of Health in any country will be able to approve and says, hey, you know what? This can help the patient with their pain. This can help the patient with anxiety. This can help reduce inflammation. This can help reduce sleep. That's where I'm going. That's my vision. And I see the world really moving down that path, where the concept of a split is actually, becoming old now.
Okay. So I want to ask you about the countries that have approached you or you have approached. You mentioned a few of them, and you said it has to be individualized. But what are some of the main factors that you see as being inhibiting factors for these countries getting on board? And maybe take us as a region, as a CARICOM region.
Well, our main challenge right now is we're talking about very high scientific clinical type research. And in many situations, that's not something that exists in the Caribbean right now. So we've got to figure out how do we leverage our intellectual capacity or universities or medical institutions or medical schools to actually be able to advance and then create the right legal framework from an intellectual property standpoint. Because what we're doing is we're creating medicine, and that's not an industry so far that the Caribbean is known for. We've got to figure out how we're going to do that.
The other thing you mentioned, it seems like we have to rebrand this product, right? You said, you want to look at it from a medical standpoint. What is your idea to rebrand this and sell this? How do you do this then? How do you take away from the idea of a spliff, like you said, and bring it into the medicinal range where we approach this as medicine?
Well, it's interesting, because the world has already moved beyond that right now. The vast majority of consumption, if you look at the legal states, whether Colorado, California, or others, no one's smoking. Smoking a spliff is almost becoming a thing of the past. There are other better ways of consuming cannabis. So, that part of it, I think, is gone away. And more, you're going to see, for example, we've had the FDA in the United States. They've approved a first product for epilepsy, Epidiolex. That's a huge starting point of an indication as to what's possible when we put our minds to it and we know what the end result is. And the end result is to have medicine that meets all the safety, all the efficacy, all those other requirements that you can have distributed through medical systems.
Listening to you,
I think the proof is going to come from the patients that we're going to help. They're the ones that's going to be bringing forward the story. They're the ones that's going to tell the story as to how this has changed their lives.
Absolutely. Listening to what you're saying, the intellectual investment that's needed to do research, the financial capital that has to go into this, the fear for the farmers in the Caribbean could be that, hey, this big corporate entity is going to move in and just take over all the gains that we have made when we were the ones being, prosecuted by people like you for this for the longest while. What do you say to the farmers and the people who are really the source of this?
Yeah, I think you raised a critical point there. So we have to figure out, because those farmers, interestingly enough, have some incredible intellectual property. And in the Caribbean, we've not really placed a value on intellectual property. A farmer goes, he starts growing a particular strain. He grows that strain for maybe 2 or 3 years. That strain is going to adapt based on things that he does to it. And he may actually have something, that's a diamond that's hidden there. So first of all, we got to figure out how do we protect their intellectual property? And then secondly, we've got to teach them that you're growing medicine, something that someone's going to consume for health and wellness. So you can't put pesticides on it. You've got to treat it a certain way, and all of these others. So there's a whole re-education process that takes place. But it all starts with the mentality of the farmer recognizing that he's actually very, very valuable and very unique in the world right now, having 20, 30, 40 years of growing cannabis.
What is your timeline when you think this is going to be widespread, like where we can say, okay, all these islands are now involved, all these countries are involved in exportation of marijuana for medicine? What is the timeline realistically that we're looking at?
Well, we've got two challenges in the industry right now. Cannabis still is not federally legal in the United States. And so that's a big barrier that, Canada, for example, we've legalized not just medical, but recreational. But you still have this big barrier with the U.S., the elephant in the room, that's saying, hey, we're not ready to fully legalize yet. So that's a little bit of an issue. But there's two kinds, and I think that's another part of it to really emphasize. You've got cannabis has over 300 different compounds, and THC, which is the one that gets you high, is the one that everyone is really looking to see what kind of systems and mechanism. But if you take CBD, which has been shown to reduce anxiety, which has been shown to help with epilepsy and all of those, that product can actually move across the world right now freely. So these are some of the things that we've got to think about as we create our individual strategies in each island.
Finally, before we go, thank you again for joining us and for the wait. So if we were to look at this, where can we get more resources and more information about your company? If I'm an investor, for example, I would like to invest in this. Where do I go?
Well, we've partnered with a public company, Tree of Knowledge, which just became 2 weeks ago the first international company that's now cross-listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And we have one mission, and that is to be able to open up the investment opportunities for people that want to get involved in the health and wellness industry. So Tree of Knowledge, TOKI, that's the stock symbol. And we see this as a great opportunity. That's why we've partnered with them. You know, we operate one of the largest medical clinic networks in Canada for pain relief, over 15,000 patients. So we have a plan, we have a strategy, we've got infrastructure, we've got revenue, and we just see tremendous upsides because we're now combining our clinics with the research, with the natural products that are coming from Jamaica and all the islands. We call it from seed to patient, and it's a really great model for us.
From seed to patient sounds like a catchy tagline. All right, his name is Mr. Courtney Betty. He's the CEO of Timeless Herbal Care, and we thank you for joining us and look forward to hearing more about your endeavors in the weeks and months and years to come.
It's my pleasure, and you're doing a great job. I had the chance to see some of the interviews before, and we need to be able to start communicating our own stories, especially in this time of crisis, as the world is trying to find solutions. You know, it's programs like yours that begin to give them at least some insight. There's just so much misinformation that's out there, not just on cannabis, but on corona, on all of these elements. And if we can just find a way of just breaking it down, I think sometimes we have all the scientists and everyone talking and the CNN and all that, but what does it mean for the common person? And I think, you know, just like your interview that you did before the musician, that's a great approach. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for the compliment, and thank you for your work, and thank you for coming back to the region and using your expertise to get us up to where we need to be internationally. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks again.